It is our pleasure to have Dr. Zaidi, Akbar Zaidi from Institute of Business Administration in Karachi, who's here. Dr. Zaidi, many of you know him through his association from IBA. He's the executive director, which is the equivalent of being the president of the university there. And the way I know of him is through my early days as a student reading his book, Issues in Pakistan's Economy. And I would say that at times, over time, when you read and you become aware of the complexities in life and economy, you need guidance. You need either guidance in person or spiritually or through writings. And I would say that in the last 25 years or more, Issues in Pakistan's Economy has been a guiding light for me. And the proof of it is that I've got at least 2 editions of the book with me. So that shows something. Some of you may not be from Toronto Metropolitan University, and I would take a second to talk about the institution. We are the 3rd university of the 3, one of the 3 universities in Toronto. Toronto Metropolitan University is the smallest of the 3, but still it is has a full-time equivalent enrollment of 46,000 students. 45,000 plus. And we are in the Ted Rogers School of Management, which is the largest business school in Canada for undergraduate education. We have full-time 12,000 students in just business education in this program, and the Ted Rogers School of Management. And we have several schools, School of Business Technology Management, School of Accounting and Finance, School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, School of Retail Management, and the School of Business Management, in which there are departments on marketing, HR, real estate, entrepreneurship, and more. And we have, I think, it is safe to say that when we look around in Toronto, and we produce the largest number of graduates every year, so I think we have the biggest impact of any business school in the region, given that we bring in 2,500 students every year, and we graduate pretty much 2,000 students every year. So all of our 2,000 business students are entering the labor market in Toronto. And one of the great things about this institution is the openness and the intellectual freedom that offers, that a business school can hold an event on Pakistan's economy, which is usually you would see in political science departments or maybe economics, but this is the beauty of having a school that is open to intellectual enterprise and entertain ideas. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Dr. Zaidi. He, as I said, through his books, probably thousands, if not more, have been influenced by his writings and his way of thinking. But some of you would have a chance to read his op-ed writings in newspapers that would show you that not only there is an element of academic rigor, but there's courage in expressing opinions and views that are sensitive, but still that needs to be said, and he has never shied away from those. So an open speaker and writer who is bringing facts and figures and economic rationale to the discourse which is missing in Pakistan. Before IBA, he was teaching at Columbia University in New York, and he has his academic appointments in several distinguished institutions from before. He is an alumni of University College London, and he did his doctorate at the Cambridge University, and you can see that touch of Cambridge when I read his work. I could actually see that influence very much there. Pakistan's economy, I would say, and probably no one that I know would have a better understanding of what's wrong. And today I've requested Dr. Zaidi to spend some time also on how do you fix that mess that we have so ably created for ourselves in Pakistan. So the conversation today will just not be on what ails the economy, but how do you go beyond it? And for Dr. Zaidi's sake, I would say that in the audience we have not only our concerned Pakistanis, but also young academic economists. We have also graduate students from different disciplines who are here and are eager to hear your words. We are grateful that you are here, sir, and the floor is all yours.
To Professor Murtaza Haider that I'm coming to Toronto, and immediately said, come and speak to students and others on Pakistan, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. What I'm going to do is sort of the argument that I'm going to make and the evidence that I'll show you is going to be about what Pakistan was in terms of its economy. I'm a political economist by training, which means that I say certain things which lots of people don't like, but I think it's important to say, to understand that I'm an academic, not a politician, not a bureaucrat, which means that as academics we have license to say certain things, to talk about certain things with and back them up. And lots of people may disagree, and that's what academics do. They have conversations. So with you as well, many of you, we can have this conversation. So the main argument is that many years ago, Pakistan was the shining example in South Asia. Its economy was doing very well. Places like Bloomberg and others said it's the rising star for South Asia. And but now, over the last few years, we see a sense of decline, very strong sense of decline. And the numbers show that. There's also a sentiment of decline. And it's in two ways. One is that it's an absolute decline from what Pakistan was doing, how well it was performing, and how well the economy was doing, and how well the prospects for the country, and also relative to other countries that are in South Asia, for example, compared to Bangladesh, compared to India. And today, with Afghanistan beating us in the cricket match, it's I'm just wondering where we are going to end up. And these are signs. I know cricket is sacred, and India beat us, Afghanistan beat us, and let's see. We've got Bangladesh and a couple of other countries. But these are signs which I think we need to think about. And I'm not even saying that jokingly, because if you think about how political economy works, how teams are made, how decisions are made, they're reflective of certain things. We have extraordinary skilled cricketers, but somehow they don't seem to work together. Is it leadership? I personally think Babar Azam, for example, is an outstanding batsman, but he's a terrible captain, and he should not be captain. And I think people like Ben Stokes and Virat Kohli realize that it's a time to step away from being leadership, and concentrate on your own skills. There's a joke about many years ago when the English cricket team was having a crisis about leadership, and the joke was that if they were looking for a captain, so when the English cricket team was looking for a captain, they asked 11 players, and all 11 said no, they don't want to be captain. When they asked the Pakistani players, all 11 said they want to be a captain. So it's sort of everybody wants to be somewhere, and I think if you think about that in greater detail, perhaps that's one of the things that affect how we think of our society and our country, my country at least, and perhaps some of yours as well, and some of you may have come from there. And I know that there are friends in the audience, so I'm very grateful that they've come here. So you'd be very shocked, like I was when I read these statements in 1965 and 1966, when it was said that Pakistan is going to be like the United States. Okay, I'm not sure that's the best country to emulate, but nevertheless, Pakistan may be on its way towards an economic milestone that has only been achieved by the United States. That's phenomenal. I mean, this is 1965, when in 1947, when Pakistan was created, there was almost certainty that Pakistan would not survive. In fact, Mr. Nehru had said many times that, okay, let them go, let Pakistan be independent, they'll come back to us. And that didn't happen. And in the 60s, Pakistan was seen as a country where it would do extraordinarily well. And the survival and development of Pakistan is one of the most remarkable examples of state and nation building in the post-war world. I'd say still, even today, I'm surprised at times by the fact that Pakistan has continued to develop it sometimes, although it's lost the larger majority of Pakistan, East Pakistan, which became independent in 1971. So, I mean, it's not true that it survived because half of it, or more than half of it, broke away. But this is a sense of where we were in the 1960s. And I was telling Murtaza today that there was a long article in The Economist, I think about 2 months ago, which was on Afghanistan after the Taliban. And the article in The Economist was making the argument that Afghanistan under the Taliban is in some ways very well governed. I mean, not the sort of country that I'd like to live in. And of course, women are not allowed to go to school there. Young girls are not allowed to go to school. But it was saying that that it's even better governed than Pakistan. Now, if countries like Afghanistan are being, shown to be better than Pakistan, there's a serious crisis that exists in a country which in 1965 was going to be the next United States. So this is a story of decline, sadly so. I've been studying the economy now for 41 years, and I've seen how the numbers and how this whole evolution has now sort of crumbled completely. So this is something to start out with. And here's a sense of how GDP growth, there's some economists here, some who are doing their masters in the economy here at this university, and you'll see two patterns here. One is the other one will be clearer in this chart after this, but you can see that it's up and down, up and down, up and down. It's what's called a roller coaster economy, a boom bust cycle, as they say. 1 year, I mean, imagine in 1968, 69, the growth rate was about 11%. In 1965, 66, it was about 10%. And then in the 1990s and 2000s, it's gone down to 2%, 1.5%. So there's a story of decline. Here you can see this yellow line. It's sort of showing the averages over time, how there's general decline. And for some people who like to look at Pakistan in different eras, Ayub Khan, People's Party, Ziaul Haq, and so on and so forth, you can see that this throughout, whether it's a general in power, whether it's a political government in power, whether it's elected government, semi-elected, hybrid, whatever you want to call it, there's a general sense of decline in the economy. This is something very evident. And this is contrasted with this very significant graph which shows three things, four things very clearly, that in 2000, just 23 years ago, Pakistan's per capita income was higher than India's, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. I think Afghanistan, because of the war, they have different types of wars, is going to be below for some time. But now Bangladesh in about 2016 got way ahead of Pakistan. And in 2020, Bangladesh was even higher than per capita India. Well, India and Pakistan, there's always been this competition that, and for about 30 or 40 years, 47 to about 2000 and so, Pakistan's economy was much better than India's in terms of per capita, but that's saying very little. But as you can see here, in about 2005, 2008, India's economy started growing much faster and the per capita income increased there. So there's a very clear worry and indication that something went wrong in Pakistan over these years. And that's the story of decline. This is the relative decline. The absolute decline I showed you in the last graph. So you can see this happening here. And here's a better sense of that per capita income and statistics. In 1982, which is 40 years ago, not long ago, Pakistan's per capita income was much higher than Bangladesh and India. And you just look at the figures in 2022, and Bangladesh today is in South Asia, it's got much better, higher per capita income than India, and Pakistan has been left way behind. So these are worrying signals, worrying trends when we think about the future, what it means. And I teach at the IBA, and I have 5,000 students at the IBA. And one of the questions I ask my students is that how many of you want to go abroad? And I think there are 3 people in class who say they don't want to go abroad and I don't know why. I think I should interview them. But these trends suggest, and that I see lots of Pakistanis in Toronto. It's like almost, as I say, it's almost like home in some ways for lots of people. One understands why. If a country where the young people are disillusioned, they don't expect hope, they don't expect prosperity, they don't expect progress, it's not surprising that they think of leaving for better opportunities. And something that I will also talk about in a little while, it's usually the young women who want to leave. When I ask in my class, how many of you who all wants to go abroad? They all say they want to go abroad, and the women especially. And when you ask the women why, they'll say, we can't dress the way we want to in Pakistan. We're not free to go out of our homes. Our parents, our brother, parents means father, not mother. Father, brother, husband in some cases will say, where are you going? Are you going to go out like that? Are you dressed like this? At what time will you be back? I ask my daughter that also when she goes out. So, but she's able to give me answers which are satisfying. But young women want to leave, and Pakistanis, we talk about this fantastic demographic advantage that we have, but the advantage is that young people want to leave, and these are hard facts, hard figures which show that there is a relative decline, there's an absolute decline. What's also worrying is this chart, and this is sort of the change that takes place. The one which I showed, this one and this one, this shows you sort of how per capita income has existed in that year in current prices. This shows you how countries are growing, the speed at which they're growing, and how per capita has increased over these 40 years, 30 years, 1990 to 2018. And this is what I mean by the relative decline, and how Bangladesh and India are moving much faster towards prosperity, progress, growth, whatever you want to call it. I mean, India has huge problems. Bangladesh has equally large problems. But in terms of economic growth, economic development, you can see that these countries are growing faster. Their income is growing, the per capita income is growing. And interestingly, Bangladesh's population, which used to be much larger than what is Pakistan, East Pakistan used to be larger, now is significantly lower than Pakistan. So if there's economic progress, economic development taking place, there are fewer people there, so the per capita income is going up as well. Pakistan's population, Pakistan is, one thing that they're very proud of is the fact that the population is increasing. I mean, I don't know, people don't seem to understand that that's not something to celebrate. But Pakistan is the 5th largest country in the world. It used to be the 7th, it's moved to 6th, it's 5th. I don't think it's going to get to the 4th, but it's a population is increasing, and with the economy not increasing, collapsing, then that makes it even more difficult. So this is a trend of how the rate of change, how growth is taking place, how much faster it is in Bangladesh, and how much slower it is in Pakistan. So it's important to look at that. This is another important figure which looks at exports in per capita terms. One of the things about Pakistan's economy is that we are constantly borrowing from the IMF, and apart from the increase in population, the fact that we are a fast-growing country which Pakistan is proud of, another record that it has is that it's the one country which has borrowed the most number of times from the IMF. That's not a record to be proud of. We beat Argentina, which is, I think, in some ways much in a better economic situation than Pakistan. So Pakistan has borrowed 23 times from the IMF, and Argentina has borrowed 21 times. It's gone to the IMF 21 times. And I know this, and I know for a fact that we are going to go back to the IMF a number of times again. And one reason why we borrow from the IMF is this chart, which shows you that our exports have they're almost flat. They've been flat for at least from 2009 to 2019. And if you look at the exports per capita of Bangladesh and India, they've been growing, at a very steep slope. So we are not able to export, and exports are very important for foreign revenue, foreign currency, for reserves. Money comes in because we don't have have a foreign currency coming in, we end up going to the IMF. And that's why we've been there 23 years. But this is a reflection of the problem. This is not the problem itself. This is a problem, a cause for many of the problems. And this is just reflected there. So the economic growth is one thing. Per capita income is growing. But what's the quality of that? What's happening with that? The richest country in per capita terms is Qatar, $170,000 per capita. But if you look at its Human Development Index, if you look at its literacy figures, if you look at these figures, it's not what one would call a high human development country. It's very low. Countries like Canada, for example, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Scandinavian countries, their per capita income is much lower than Qatar, Kuwait, and other countries. But Human Development Index is the highest. It's I think Canada is usually 1 or 2, Norway is 1 or 2, 3, Finland. It's usually Finland, Norway, Canada, these 4 or 5 countries which do very well in the Human Development Index. So this is again a reflection of that. As you can see, in 1950, if India, Bangladesh didn't exist at the time, and Pakistan and Vietnam were about the same. So you can see that Vietnam's economy has grown, India's economy has grown, Bangladesh's economy has grown, but so has literacy, women's literacy, very important, long and healthy life, and other aspects of human development. So it's not just the economy which is not doing well, but because the economy is not doing well, the Human Development Index has fallen. And now, I'll show you a figure in a while, which shows that Pakistan's human development is the worst in South Asia. This is youth literacy. We are worse than Nepal, Maldives, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and this is a very worrying sign that we talk about the young population in Pakistan, but if you have an illiterate, uneducated young population, that sounds something which is quite terrifying. While countries like Sri Lanka have a literacy, and Maldives and even India has a literacy of 92%, Sri Lanka is 99%, we are still 75%, and because of Afghanistan, we'll always be second last. I think that's fairly sure, and now especially because young girls can't study in Afghanistan, these numbers for Afghanistan 2018, they're going to fall substantially, and we'll still be, I can't say always, we'll be the second worst in South Asia, in SAARC at least. So this is something which is quite scary for the future, and that's why you find people saying they don't want to be here, they want to leave. So there's something very important to think about. Life expectancy. Bangladesh now has life expectancy which is 74 years, which is quite good compared in 1990, just 30 years ago, when Pakistan and Bangladesh's life expectancy was about the same. But because of the increased economic situation, better per capita income, the human development, you can see life expectancy in Bangladesh is now 74, which is quite good, while in Pakistan it's about almost 67 and a half or so years, and life expectancy in India has also grown. So you can see that this trend where Pakistan in, say, 1990 was much better than Bangladesh and India, it has now fallen way behind its comparable countries in South Asia. So again, it's relative decline as well as absolute decline. I think one needs to emphasize that. Why does that happen? There are many reasons for that. I mean, if you think about why Pakistan's economy is not doing well, and here's a graph which shows that Pakistan is considered the 10th most powerful army in the world. I always thought it was the 7th most powerful army. I don't know why we slipped to number 10. But if you look at the other figures, there's something quite worrying there, that in terms of Human Development Index, we are in the bottom. The Gender Parity Index is perhaps the most, I think, the scariest for me, that there are only 2 countries where the Gender Parity Index is far worse than it is in Pakistan. And one of them is Afghanistan, and the other one is Yemen. And both are countries which have been war-torn, and Pakistan is not, it doesn't seem to be, as affected by the war around Pakistan like Yemen and Afghanistan has been, but we are the third worst country in terms of gender parity. And whatever else you do about the economy, of society, change that you bring about, if women are not educated, it's half your population is missing something. The corruption index, we are again very low in the list, which means that there's very high corruption. Food security index, the water quality index. So I mean, these are numbers which sort of show, in some sense, what our priority has been, what our political economy has been, and the army, for some people, is very important, because of a security situation. But then the question arises: if we are sort of giving up security of humankind and investing somewhere else, when women are uneducated, where the Human Development Index stays poor. Here's a map of which speaks for itself. I don't need to talk much about this. It's where what are called cantonments are in Pakistan, and I think there were about 57 or 56 cantonments, which shows how institutions like the military are very important in Pakistan. And you can use important in whichever sense you want to use it, how they manage real estate, their influence all over. And, they've ruled Pakistan for 35 years. And I think one of when we look at why Pakistan has not done well, often the blame is on elected representatives, but I think there are other institutions which have also played a role, and perhaps things could have been very different. Here's another comparison of India and Pakistan. And this also says a few things. For example, the Chief of Army Staff, the head of the military, for example, the role that they play in our political economy in Pakistan compared to India's. No Prime Minister in Pakistan, elected or unelected, has completed his or her tenure, while in India, 8 Prime Ministers have completed their tenure. India has had 14 Prime Ministers since 1947. Pakistan has had 23 or 24. The first general election in India was held in 1951. We've had many since 1970, but we had to wait 25 years, and the consequences of that were very different. India has had far more Chief of Army Staffs than Pakistan has over the last 75 years. I'm not sure if this chart is saying something, but this data is out there for people to think about. What is our priorities, what is our political economy looking like, and so on and so forth. But it's not just the military which plays a very major role. It's also the richest 1% in Pakistan, the ownership of the inequality, something that we often don't speak very much about. So I think when a lot of people hold the military responsible for what has not worked in Pakistan, and some people hold the politicians, civilians responsible. But it's more than that. It's not just military, civilians. I think it's a little bit more than that. It's our social system, our economic system, where the richest 1% hold about 20% of farm area, 16% of property, 9% of national income, and only 1% of Pakistanis pay income tax. So when you have figures like that, you get a very lopsided type of economy. That the rich, the elite, I'm part of that as well. Some people here may also be part of that. They control resources far more than in similar countries. If you look at the distribution of income, distribution of wealth in India, Bangladesh, it's not as unequal. It's very unequal, no question about that, but not as unequal as it is in Pakistan. The elite is very, very well protected, but because the economy is now coming undone, there's an economic crisis which has emerged over the last 10 years, 15 years or so. This chart, for example, shows the line is coming down. The line in the middle, the yellow line, is coming down. The average growth rate is coming down. So even the elite, who used to benefit a great deal from the way Pakistan was developed, governed, And now they're facing a crisis because the economic pie is becoming smaller and smaller. And even for them, there's now finally an elite crisis which has emerged, which might give rise to certain ideas which I want to talk about in the last couple of slides. So when we talk of Pakistan, we talk about the geopolitics around it: Afghanistan, the US role, Saudi Arabia's role, China's role. China has played a very significant role in Pakistan. And this comes as a surprise to some people that as much as almost, I think the numbers have gone up, about 30% of Pakistan's total debt is controlled by China. It's not the IMF only. It's not Saudi Arabia or the United States. As you can see, they're way down in terms of numbers here. But it's China which has given Pakistan the largest amount of aid, and aid as a loan. So this has to be paid back. This is a very significant factor which will have, I think, repercussions over the next couple of decades as China becomes more forceful in the context of the region, with India, China, and America, thinking differently now. So I think this is something that we need to think about, because China, unlike other countries, does not write its debt off. It says, we are going to take this port or that part of the country, or they trade off the write-off debt for land or something like that. So this is something very significant that we want to think about. Pakistan claims that China is its greatest friend. The friendship is higher than the highest Himalayas, sweeter than the sweetest honey, deeper than the deepest seas. But this is the cost that comes with it. So, friendship also sometimes has a burden. So this is the burden that we need to think about. It's good to have friends, but on what terms? So this is the last slide. And I want to talk about 4 things that I talk about all the time, about what needs to be done. What are the solutions, people say? One is that, and I'll talk to them, I'll talk about them in this order first, that as you saw, if the gender parity index puts Pakistan at the 3rd worst country in the world, there's something very, very seriously wrong with our country, with us, with men. Gender parity means men have far greater rights, they have more income, more power, however you want to look at it. So unless women are given more opportunities in education, in employment, protection, security, transport, every sense, every area that you can think of, we are going to, I think the problems that exist in Pakistan are going to continue. Without recognizing what women can do, what they've achieved, giving them benefits, giving them opportunities, I think we're going to be stuck in the same low human development trap, the low economic trap. So that's the first thing. The second is when the service delivery. Now what this means is there are 4 provinces in Pakistan, and these provinces were created by the British, and after that, after independence in 1947. And we've still got 4 provinces. When India got independence, India had 15 provinces, states. Today it has 29, I think. I've lost count. I think the last I counted, there were 28 or 29. And India has not split apart. It's got its own problem, got lots of problems. But the way the states have been realigned, states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, now Andhra Pradesh was broken up into 2 and other states have emerged, is a sign and a signal that, you can't have large administrative units when your population has increased a great deal. You need to have smaller units, provinces. My estimate is that Pakistan needs about 12 provinces or states, whatever you want to call them, not 4. It just doesn't work. 4 does not work. Somebody living in the south in Balochistan has to go to Quetta, where there are, and has to deal with Quetta, or somebody living in the south of Punjab has to deal with Lahore, rather than, headquarters which are more localized. So a country like Pakistan, 250 million people, which still has the 4 colonial structures of administration, has not evolved to a service delivery model, and it needs far more provinces. It's something that I think we need to think about. The third thing here is that Pakistan has Afghanistan, Iran, India, and China as neighbors. Russia a little further up. We don't talk to India. We're not sure whether we are at peace or with war with them. With Afghanistan, with the government there, we have very little relationships. With Iran, under American pressure, we are unable to buy their cheap oil, which the rest of the world can buy. India can buy oil from Iran, Pakistan can't, because we are dependent on the Americans. So unless we fix our relations with our neighbors, the trend that you see here and here is going to continue. It's important that Pakistan's government, its military, its technocrats, its civil society works and engages with its neighbors, and particularly with India. And when I say particularly with India, the reason for that is that for the next 2 years, the fastest growing large economy in the world is going to be India, not China. So India's growth rate in 2023, 2024, and 2025 is going to be the fastest of the large economies anywhere in the world, much more than China. In fact, China's growth rate has come down a great deal. We are neighbors to India, the fastest growing economy in the world, and we don't talk to them, and they don't talk to us. It just doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense to me, I understand why, but it just doesn't make sense to me. How can Pakistan's economy not work with India? How can Pakistan's military and civil leadership and business community not want better trade relations, better economic relations with India? Mr. Nawaz Sharif, who came back after 4 years in self-exile 2 days ago, he gave a public address the other day, and he said he wants better relations with India. I think that's a good sign. Mr. Imran Khan wanted better relations with India. Benazir wanted better relations with India. There are lots of people who want much better economic relations with India. There's some people who don't want any relations with India. I mean, I live in Pakistan. I've always lived in Pakistan. I remember the time when we had cricket matches, when India's cricket team came to Lahore, came to Karachi, and in 2007-8, that was the most extraordinary sort of time that I can think of in my adult life, when I saw Indian movies shown in Pakistan, Indian cricketers, Indian civil society, musicians coming to Pakistan, and Pakistanis going there. Today, it's almost impossible for Pakistanis and Indians to go to each other's country. Pakistan held the Asia Cup in Pakistan. It was supposed to be in Pakistan. India refused to send its cricket team. So we've sent our cricket team, but okay, maybe we shouldn't have for other reasons, for the way we are playing. But I think that I cannot comprehend how Pakistan's economy is going to get out of the trap it's fallen into without negotiating and working with India. Mr. Modi is going to be re-elected, most probably. He's not going anywhere. India is not going anywhere. Our neighbors are going to be the same. Afghanistan, I have no idea what's going to happen there. But Afghanistan and India are both going to be there. Iran is still going to be there. And we can't ignore 1.2 billion people, a market of a large number, a huge market of a middle class there, with which we can trade with. I mean, a lot of people fear that if we trade with India, our economy is going to get swamped. I think that's already happened because of China, and I don't think it's going to get much worse. So there is a realization, there's a need for a realization that our military leadership, our civilian leadership, our political leadership needs to think about how it's going to work. You can't ignore India, and you have to work with Mr. Modi. You may not like him, you may not like his policies, you may not like what he's doing with Muslims, you may not like what he's doing with Kashmir, but perhaps there's a need to think about these things. China and India had a war, I think, 4 years ago. Today, China is India's largest trading partner. Not surprising. China is the largest trading partner with with 153 countries. Obviously, it makes sense. China trades with Taiwan, which Taiwan claims that it's an independent country. It's independent from China. China claims that Taiwan belongs to China, and yet they trade openly. China trades, Iran, and until before this Hamas uprising and the Palestinian uprising last week, Iran and Saudi Arabia started talking to each other. Iran and Saudi Arabia exchanged ambassadors, or started talking about ambassadors after many, many years, just a few days ago. So if Iran and Saudi Arabia can talk to each other, Pakistan and India have to talk to each other. If a problem, a so-called Shia-Sunni divide has existed for 1400 years, India-Pakistan divide has existed for only 75 years. If those who believe in a type of separation because of religion can finally sit down and talk about what's good for their people, I think India and Pakistan have to sit down. The military is a central part of Pakistan's politics, its economy, whether you like it or not. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people feel that they are a stabilizing factor. They play a very prominent role in the economy. There's this new setup which looks at economic development, foreign direct investment, and things like that, in which the military plays a role. Even if you're critical of the military, you have to recognize that they exist there. They're not going to go away. You can't wish them away. So there's a need for civilian leadership, politicians, to work with the military. The military needs to work with civilian leaderships as well. I think it's very important. Fortunately, there hasn't been a coup in Pakistan for the last 20 years now, since 1999, a little longer than that. There have been elections, for the 3 elections, continuous elections. I'm quite sure there are going to be elections in February, January or February, probably February. The military plays a very dominant role in what happens politically. You can't deny that. The military doesn't deny that either. But so you have to negotiate with the military, have to work with the military. Nawaz Sharif, some of you may have been following the politics of Pakistan, a few weeks ago made some very strong statements about individuals in the military. Imran Khan has been doing that for some time, and I admire his courage for being so forthright. But the consequences are such that one political leader was in exile, probably the most popular politician in Pakistan, Imran Khan, is in jail. We don't know what's going to happen with his future, to his political future. I think there has to be some way of how civilians, political leaders can create space and move forward. It's happened in many countries. Indonesia is a very good example. Turkey is an older example where Egypt was a possibility, but then it failed. Thailand was a possibility, but then it went back. It also failed there. But I think there has to be some form of negotiations between the military, between political leaders, between technocrats, between civil society, to think about how Pakistan should get out of the mess that it is in. The way forward for Pakistan is to realize, most importantly, to realize what's wrong. I think we are at a moment, and I think the most important thing that's happened is the geopolitics has changed. That, the Americans are no longer interested in Afghanistan. From 1979 onwards, when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, till 2 years ago, this region around Pakistan was one where the Americans and Saudi Arabia had played a very important role. Today, they are no longer interested. So the benefit, so-called benefit that Pakistan got by its geopolitical situation, by the American proximity in that region, the importance of that region is gone. Geopolitics has changed. China today is a major world power. It's no longer a regional power. It's no longer a sub-power. It's the Americans and China. I mean, Russia is slightly on the side. So it's important. The geopolitics has changed. It's now much more important for Pakistan to think about how things have changed. We can't claim rent for our geography, which we used to. We have to rethink these things. So I'll end here by saying that, it's a cliche to say that these are the most difficult times for Pakistan because every 5 years is the most difficult times for Pakistan. But I think today we are at a place where there is a greater existential crisis than there has been, and there have been many, from 1971 to 99 to numerous existential crises. But I think we're at a moment now where there's a need for all leadership, all the elite leadership, to start thinking about doing things differently. We can't go back to the IMF. 23 times we've been there. We've failed because the IMF keeps coming back. Nothing has improved. We can't rely on America because it's got its hands full of different things. The Americans are now asking Pakistan to improve their own situation. Saudi Arabia, even, a country that we used to turn to every 15 days for $1 billion, turned around and said, look, time to fix up your own mess before we invest, I think. China has its own aspirations in the region, globally. It's somehow going to sort itself out in the region as well. So I think it's important that the Pakistani leadership, civil, military, political, technocratic, needs to think about what sort of future it wants. Until then, I think this graph is going to continue to go down. And figures like this, where we continue to be the second from the bottom in literacy, figures like this, that we are the third worst country in the world in terms of gender parity, the gender index. Figures like this, for example, where the per capita income is going down, India, Bangladesh are getting far more prosperous than we are going to continue. And I think we have to realize that. We have to acknowledge the failures of the past and have to think differently. I think that's all. The most important thing is the past has not worked. We have to think a different future. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
You've seen the graphs. All are pointed downwards. Only the population graph is going up. Every other indicator is heading south. We want to know, if you have questions, what would you like to know? Because we want to make the best of Professor Zaidi's presence here. So floor is open. Raise your hand if you have a question. One. Okay.
Thank you very much for presenting these charts. For sure, they are very discouraging, but besides the fact that they are discouraging, but your concerns and solution you provided, these are encouraging for us, that at least some of the guys are so much concerned about that and they are suggesting some solutions as well. So my question is, like being a graduate student or as an individual, what can I do? So what would be my role? Because I don't think so these solutions, these suggested things are in our hand. Like they can be, for sure, would be a solution that can be implemented by the policy makers or government level bodies. But what would be our solution? What could be our solution?
So, as individuals, you have to make your own choices. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, my students at the IBA, which is a very good university, very competent students there, they want to leave, and it's not, and you get jobs in Pakistan. Okay. But when your income is say 100,000 rupees, and you find that the dollar rate, the Canadian dollar or the US dollar is it's gone up from 150 rupees to a dollar to 350 rupees to a dollar in a matter of a year and a half, you say that the 100,000 rupees is useless. Even individuals who 100,000 is a very decent salary for somebody like you, a young person, and graduates from good universities make 100,000 quite easily. But when they find that their electricity bill is something like 30,000, 40,000, because the thing is that it's easy for the government to put a surcharge on electricity rather than ask you what your income is and that you pay income tax. So it becomes very discouraging. It's not a happy situation. And I think, I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but it is a doomsday story. It is a story of where things have not worked and where things have sort of fallen to a level. So I think that if all the Pakistanis who are living in Canada, and I don't know how many million there are, how many 100,000 there are, do you know what?
I think about 150, 200.
No, it must be more than that.
Close to 500,000.
Okay, that's okay. So I mean, even if they were to come back, they're very skilled, I'm sure none of them want to, but very skilled, very well-to-do, they'd also be very frustrated. And the reason why people want to leave is that, it's not easy to set up a business if you want. You can get a job, but will that keep you happy? I don't know if you saw this on social media recently, just a few days ago, that there was a professor in Bannu, for example, a professor of biology, where he was visited by certain people, and they said that you can't teach Darwin's theory of the evolution because the Quran says something else. And he had to sign papers and documents what's that called, on government paper, saying that he doesn't believe in the theory of evolution, for example. So if you have people like that who are forced to, who come and tell you that, you can't think this way, you can't teach this way, who's going to stay in Pakistan? So, I don't want to say that Pakistan should not come back to Pakistan. I want to live in Pakistan. I don't have any other passport. I barely get a visa to travel. So, but I don't want to leave because I'm very well off. I'm comfortable. So that's why it's easy for me to live there. Although I also feel that it's becoming more difficult, the cost of living and things like that. So it's disheartening to say that, don't come back. Make something of your life here, and then at some point, if you want to come back, you should. Having said that, there are also opportunities in Pakistan. One of the things that's in the recent years has been this computer IT boom that's taken place. If you look at Pakistan's statistics, another statistic which is very positive is our exports on IT. This is one indicator which is going up. And that's because you don't need, you just need a laptop, basically. You can do programming, you can do, graphic designing and things like that. And American and Canadian companies, something that you were talking about, Haris was talking about earlier, they outsource their work to cheap countries like India, Pakistan, where they have the skills. And so there are Pakistanis doing a lot. My students at the IBA and at other universities are doing a lot of, entrepreneurial work sitting from home. But it's difficult to say, come back. It's a great place to be. I'm not sure if I can say that. It's a great place to be. That's why people want to leave. As an economist, I would look at that data and say that one possible explanation is that you have new immigrants from Pakistan. So it's more likely that new immigrants who come here, it takes time for you to rise up in the professional field to get a higher paid income. Without looking at the data, I'd say that would be my response. That one reason could be that 2-3 reasons. One, maybe larger family sizes. If they have 3 children, 4 children, which North American and European families usually don't have. And I don't know what we're comparing with when we look at Pakistani. The second would be perhaps lower skilled people are coming to Pakistan, to Canada from Pakistan. Third would be whoever is coming from Pakistan is coming at a younger age and they have not been able to find jobs. So I think that would be a sense of looking at the data. And it'd be interesting to know what, say, on the other hand, if you look at the United States data, Pakistani incomes seem to be higher than what you're saying they are in Canada. And I'm actually surprised at the numbers that you're giving me. I wouldn't have thought that they're as low as you're suggesting that they are. And if you said single owner, that's maybe because a lot of the women, for some cultural, traditional reason, don't work. And the second is maybe they're not even competent or trained enough to work. So it's both. So if you have district governments, for example, if you have city government, for example, I mean, even when Imran Khan's government used to run Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they didn't have local government elections. Even when PMLN, for example, or this time when the PTI, Buzdar government was running Punjab, and when PMLN, Nawaz Sharif was running Punjab, they refused to have elections as a local government. Only when the military governments were there, they had local government elections. Even in Sindh, it's only now, they've recently had local government elections with the People's Party winning a lot of seats. They refused to, because these local level leaders, they challenge provincial governments, provincial MPAs, what are called members of the provincial assembly, for patronage, for power, for money. So so it shows you actually that local governments work. And that's what should work. I mean, in most countries, it's your neighborhood, your borough, your county, whatever you want to call it, which are effective. I mean, in small towns. So that's the reason why they haven't been doing it. And in fact, now there's a big move to undo the 18th Amendment because the provinces have gained more power. They've been more effective. And the province of Sindh, because of it's the People's Party government, has gotten a lot of bad press for lots of reasons. But you'd be surprised at the number of initiatives that have been taken over there. So I think the 18th Amendment did work well. The 18th Amendment, for those who don't know, was an intervention in the Constitution where the provinces get far more autonomy and they get more power to do service delivery. Let's call it service delivery. So, and you're right about the fact that, the south of Punjab, the Saraiki belt, I think should be a separate province. I think Punjab should be at least 3 provinces, broken up into 3, central, northern with Pothohar, and you can say the same for Balochistan, the same for Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But the politicians who are entrenched in the system, they are the biggest hindrance to this sort of, development. Wants better relations with India because they realize that they're missing out. And I mean, it's very difficult to talk to Mr. Modi, but despite Mr. Modi, and I think Imran Khan should get credit for reaching out to Modi many times when he came into power, and Modi said he doesn't want to talk to Imran Khan for whatever reason. He was willing to talk to Nawaz Sharif, and he did come and meet Nawaz Sharif on his way back from Kabul just before he was dismissed. The army chief Bajwa said something very interesting, which became public, that Pakistan's army does not have the ability to fight with India anymore. We don't even have petrol to put in our tanks. That's what he said. Apparently, these are quotes. I think even the military now realizes that the way things haven't worked. They're not working, because when we see the economy crumbling the way it is, this chart is coming down. When we see this happening, it's not just rich people like me and others, my friends, who are complaining and saying, okay, things are becoming more difficult. It's also the military which is saying that, this is not working. When inflation hits everybody, the price of petrol, when it goes up to 300 rupees a litre, hits PIA, which has to cut down its flights. It hits people who have money. It hits the military. So it hits everybody. So I think I have a sense, maybe it's a hope rather than a sense. A sense requires some hard thinking and some evidence. So there's no evidence, but that's why it's a hope. That there is a sense of a realization that you have to do things differently. Can't ignore India. Don't like India, that's fine. And there have been, Musharraf was very keen on finding a solution to Kashmir and the India problem. And I think that Nawaz Sharif is probably or possibly going to come back into power. If not him, his party is going to come back into power, because it's an arrangement with the military. And the military knows that he wants better relations with India. And perhaps they'll realize, okay, it's time to start thinking. You can't fight with all your neighbors all the time. Sometimes you have to say, okay, it's important to think differently. And as I'm saying, it's probably hope more than a sense of what's going to happen. Because things are so bad, you have to think something differently. There's been no new thinking about how to address Pakistan's problems. And I think now there's growing conversation. That somebody was saying that, at least you can talk about these things, and you can talk about them in public as well. When I go and speak to public servants, when I speak to people at defense universities as well, I say similar things. I say, look, we have to think about things differently. And they're open to listening to what I'm saying, but it's up to them whether they do something like that or not. So there are 2 other countries which have strong. The question was that what role does, I'll summarize it. What role can the military play in economic development in terms of agricultural land and other examples from elsewhere? So there are 2 countries which come to mind. One is Egypt and one is Indonesia. Egypt still has a very strong, prominent military. General Sisi is still, the military's man. And Indonesia has moved on to civilian government and they've put aside, but the military does have an economic influence, not control, which they have in Pakistan and Egypt, but an influence. Bangladesh is a very interesting example. Bangladesh, until the 1990s, the military was very strong in politics and in the economy. They have been put aside by two women who've run Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is also not a democratic model, as we see now. But and Thailand is another model where the military also has influence in the economy. So I think there are models where because the dominance of the military, I mean, one way is to have a revolution. I don't see that happening. Imran Khan tried, failed, that's why he's in jail. He said things he identified people who he believed were responsible for his ouster, and they happen to be very senior people in the military. That's why he's paying the consequences. So it's not going to come through an elected revolution like that, or an elected process. So I think that's where I said earlier that Pakistan has had 3 elections back to back. Okay, the military's, the shadow of the military reigns heavily on those electoral processes, and they're not fair, transparent, and free. But the fact that we've had 3 elections and we're going to have a 4th one is an indication that, one is that there hasn't been a coup. Imran Khan was not thrown out by a military coup. He was thrown out by a constitutional coup backed by the military. It's very different. Not very, but somewhat different. So I think that there is a need to accommodate, to acknowledge the fact that the military is a player. And they are now have a big influence on the economy as well, in taking decisions like land for agriculture, for example. The grievance for civilians and business people is that, it's not a level playing field. And you can't compete against the military, and you're going to marginalize them out as well. So there will have to be some accommodation, because if business people stop investing, stop producing, then you're going to have very serious continuing economic crisis. I don't think the military in any country is trained to run the economy, right? And you could have your small military farm, you could run your, make your cornflakes or whatever else militaries do, but you can't really run an economy. And I think we've seen that in the past as well, whether it was Ayub or Zia or Musharraf. It's not something that is persistent. Do it for a little while, but not. So there will have to be some give and take. And that's why when I said negotiating with the military or negotiating the military, I'm implying that there will have to be some sort of arrangement between the military and the non-military, or the civilians and the military. So, that turfs will have to be defined. Again, maybe wishful thinking. But because things are so bad, sometimes the crisis is good. And I think we've reached that point where the IMF might not bail us out over and over again. The Americans are certainly not bailing us out. China is not bailing us out. Saudi Arabia is not. We'll have to come to our own solutions. So you had another question. So the common man wasn't asked when a coup took place. The common man wasn't asked when Imran Khan was convicted or put in jail. The common man is never asked anything, or when Nawaz Sharif was allowed to come back. So the common man, or woman actually, do they matter? I think they matter a lot, but they're sidelined. My guess would be that common people would say whatever is good for the economy. And I will, as an economist, I've done some research on this some years ago. I've argued that if we don't trade with India, if we don't have better economic conditions, we suffer, not India. India is doing fine without us. In fact, we are an irritant for India. And, you can see that at the cricket matches. And there's now, I think under Modi also, there's a lot of hatred against Pakistan and against Muslims. And that's not going to help Pakistan trying to reach out to India. That's another problem. Pakistan may be willing to, even the military, civil, political leadership may be willing to have better relations, but Modi was going to say, we don't need you, get lost, or something to that effect. But I think the common person, man and woman, would want better relations with India. I mean, why would we not want better relations? Why, especially when it's in our benefit, when it's better economically? And why would you want, to continuously upset or, not want to work with somebody with whom you could benefit? Probably, preferably on equal terms, whatever they are. I mean, there's a very interesting analogy with in North America, for example. You have the United States. Now, and there are three, call them countries, around the United States. Mexico, Canada, and Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is not exactly a country, but let's consider that a country. Now, United States dominates North America and the West still. So you have Mexico benefiting, working with North America, very much so. Canada benefits a great deal, more than North America, than the US. And then you have Puerto Rico. So Pakistan has the option to be India's Canada, or Mexico, or Puerto Rico. So, we can be, or China's Puerto Rico for that matter. So either you start saying that, okay, we have differences, historical and other, but let's put them aside. China and India, surprisingly, their militaries train together. They have these military games, although they kill each other at the border as well. So it's a very strange relationship, and their economic relationships have only gotten better despite skirmishes, despite the fact that Xi and Modi don't trust each other. But when economics is good for good business, you deal with your enemy. Okay, thank you, Faisal. That question was about, say, to summarize, China-Pakistan economic possibilities and what that will entail. Can one trust China? That's a bigger question. China is not a benevolent player. For them, it's a sense of what they can get out of the equation. Fair enough. You're doing business, you're not giving charity. Although, as you can see, China has given a lot of charity or aid to Pakistan. Again, that's business, not charity. When this CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, was started, I think now 10 years ago, they just celebrated 10 years, there was great optimism about what China would do for Pakistan. Build roads, build highways, and Pakistan would become the next, Gwadar would become the next Dubai. I fear that Gwadar will become the next Hambotanta. Very, very likely that if it becomes anything, which is another question, will it ever become anything? So the thing is that the Chinese are also, I think, much smarter than other businessmen when it comes to their own interests, and rightfully so. If they can make inroads in Vietnam, which they have, despite their political problems, or in the Philippines, or in Africa, why would they trade with a country like Pakistan where Chinese individuals are killed? It's not infrequent. It happens quite a lot where Chinese business people, Chinese investors are picked up, killed, and so on and so forth. So there's this fear of how safe their individuals feel. And secondly, China has also told Pakistan to put its own act in order before they're willing to come forth with more goodies. So I think so we are highly reliant on China. Pakistan is highly reliant for its imports, like most countries are, not so much for its exports. But beyond that, I don't think the Pakistani entrepreneurs have been able to leverage this friendship with China to their advantage. In fact, China has benefited much more out of this relationship. Can Pakistan accept that? It hasn't. Imran Khan continuously said that after, I think it's 2 years now, or 3 years now, since the repeal of Article 370, he refuses to talk to Modi, he refuses to acknowledge him, and so on and so forth. But, despite that, Pakistan's foreign minister, the young Mr. Bilawal Bhutto, went to India. He wasn't treated very well, but he went to India physically for that, I think it was a Shanghai Cooperation Conference in Goa some months ago when he was a foreign minister. So it's going to be very difficult, but difficult things are possible as well. So I think Pakistan might have to acknowledge certain realities which it does not want to acknowledge, even maybe not publicly, maybe privately, that, Kashmir is a settled issue. Can't do anything about it. You can raise the hue and cry over it in a public jalsa, but you're not really going to get any land from India. So put it aside. talk about other things. Let's talk about, cricket and trade and Bollywood and better economic relations, more, better relations between two neighbors. And say, okay, we'll come to Kashmir at some other point. If you keep putting Kashmir, say, we are not going to talk to India unless the Kashmir problem is addressed, we will never talk to India. So I think it's a matter, and this is what Musharraf was trying to do, that, the problem of Kashmir existed then. Unfortunately, I think it's going to exist for a long time to come. So it's not going away. But nor is the decline going away. Nor is India's success going away. Do we ignore that? Or do we say, okay, let's put Kashmir aside for a moment. We'll talk about it in 10 years. Let's not, you don't invade us, we don't invade you. Let's talk about other things. Because if you start talking about Kashmir, nothing's going to happen. If you don't talk about Kashmir, nothing's going to happen again. So maybe think of doing things somewhat differently from the past. Say, we'll talk about Kashmir later. So you also have countries like or not. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if Canada is a Christian country. I have no idea. United States, again, what is a Christian country? If you ask social scientists, they'll say, we don't understand what that means. They might say these 55 countries are Muslim countries. But is which country? And India is a Hindu country, if one can call it that. It's certainly not Christian, it's not Muslim. It's not secular either anymore. So I mean, its growth rate is faster. So I think this clash of civilizations argument, which this sort of says is redundant, because you have to look at history, you have to look at colonialism. You have so-called Muslim countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey. I mean, I wish, I shouldn't say this aloud, but on record, but the type of Islam that they have in Turkey is a very different type of Islam that they have in Saudi Arabia and they have in Pakistan. And if that's Islam, that's a fantastic way to profess your religion. Malaysia has a very different kind. Malaysia's economy is not as bad as a lot of other countries which are supposedly Christian. So I don't think this mapping, is very helpful. I think you have to look at history. You'll have to look at particular countries for their own reasons why they are that. So I don't think religion plays that role. I think you could say that certain cultural elements like the position of women, for example, plays a role. It does. But there are other countries like Iran where religion is very strong, but the 99% of women are literate. Bangladesh, 99% of women are literate. 97%. And religion doesn't stop them there. So I think religion is not the key factor. It could be a small element. Yeah, but I mean, she was prime minister for very short periods of time. She was not able, Benazir was not able to do a lot of things. That she spoke a lot about gender parity, women's rights, and there were certain policies under her, and also under Musharraf. I mean, this is something that we need to acknowledge, that he said a lot of very crazy things, but he also gave women more rights. I mean, for example, 1/3 elected representatives in parliament are supposed to be women. This is something that Musharraf did. Now, India is doing that as well. India, the proportion of elected representatives in Indian parliament is much lower than Pakistan. So they are, I think in 2025, there's a constitutional or parliamentary debate or act or whatever it is, where women are going to have reserved seats. I think society is also changing, and this is something Murtaza and I were talking about earlier, before we came here, that you find more and more women going to university. Women are much smarter than guys. We know that. We don't need. There's so much evidence about that. You look at every exam in every university. It's also always women who do well. And I said this once. When I was teaching at Columbia. They said also at Columbia. So it's not just the Christian or Muslim or Pakistan or India. It's women are smarter. We know that. Men don't realize that, but they are. So you go to universities. There are more and more girls going to university. And the more and more girls, there's this IT boom, computer science. It's not only men, it's women as well. It's young women who are leading that IT revolution in Pakistan. They are now more visible, but they're far behind in terms of income, in terms of earnings. As you said yourself, a lot of them are paid. They're doing housework. They're doing domestic labor. They're doing ghar ki safai. So they don't register in the economic statistics. But it's a complete myth to think that women don't work. If women didn't work, no country would function. It's women who do the work. So there is, I think some figures and statistics are not reported. Having said that, there's also very severe discrimination against women. And it's a big fight which women are fighting. So there are two things here. One is that for the last 30 years, Pakistan's economy has been run by the IMF, and it's failed. So Pakistan's economy's failure is also the IMF's party. The military, People's Party, Nawaz Sharif's party and Imran Khan's party, they think the same. They protect their own interests, their own elite interests. Taxation, for example, if with less than 1% of the population paying income tax, you're going to run to the IMF for money. You don't need to go to them. I mean, every academic study, if any of you are thinking of doing an economic project on Pakistan, look at the taxation structure, then you'll find that a lot of problems exist there. No political party is willing to put a tax on retailers, for example, because they say that's their support base. They're not willing to put a tax on real estate because that's where a lot of these people invest, the elite invest. So we don't need a philosophy. It's protecting the rich. All four parties, have done the same. And I think a crisis as we have now, we do have an economic crisis. Things might be looking slightly better now than they were 6 months ago, but it's only slightly, and it's only for a short time. So I think what an economic crisis or crises that exist in Pakistan allow all these four actors, or make these four actors to think about, are we going to do anything differently? Are we going to protect ourselves and then have less to live off? And I think the answer to that is, okay, we need to do something different. That's why I keep coming back to this. I think what you were saying, that we need to, the old way of thinking has not worked. Every indicator is showing that things are getting worse, to the point that how much further are they going to get worse? So I think that if whichever party comes to power, they will have to take certain measures for structural reform of the economy. Some may be very unpopular, but they'll have to be taken. So I'll end there. All of you.
It's very rare for Pakistanis in Canada to have intellectual discourse about Pakistan. We do have dinners and we do have cultural shows, but we seldom sit down and look at charts and graphs. And thanks, because of you, we got this opportunity to actually think seriously about this. So we are very grateful. Thank you very much.
डॉक्टर साहब वेलकम टू टोरंटो। ये बताइए कि पाकिस्तान इन इमर्जिंग कंट्री के हिसाब से अपना मकाम खो चुका, और अभी जितने भी इंडिकेटर्स हैं वो बहुत पेसिमिस्टिक हैं, तो आप बताएंगे कि इसकी क्या वजूहात हैं, ऐसा क्यों हुआ और कौन कौन ज़िम्मेदार है?
इसकी बहुत शुक्रिया आपका। इसकी कई वजूहात हैं। एक तो आप देखें कि पाकिस्तान जो पिछले 40 साल से अफ़गानिस्तान में जो सूरत हाल थी, उसको नुकसान भी बहुत हुआ है, कुछ फ़ायदे भी बहुत हुए हैं। अमेरिका का जो रवैया था पाकिस्तान के साथ, जो एड मिलती थी वो 40 साल तक मिलती आई है, काफ़ी उससे फ़ायदे भी हुए हैं, और एक आप कह सकते हैं हल्का हाथ रखा जाता था। दूसरा ये जो अब वो ख़त्म हो गया है, जैसे अफ़गानिस्तान जियोपॉलिटिक्स बदली है, उस इलाके में जो तब्दीली आई है पाकिस्तान में, उसमें थोड़ा फ़र्क हुआ है और पाकिस्तान पे उसके असरात बहुत वाज़ेह हैं। दूसरी चीज़ जो हुई है कि हमारे यहाँ हुकूमतें जो हैं चंद महीने के बाद बदलती रही हैं, महीने तो नहीं, साल के बाद। हमारे कोई कंसिस्टेंसी नहीं रही है, चाहे वो एक शख्स हो या दूसरी हुकूमत हो। आई थिंक उसमें थोड़ा उसका भी कसूर है, क्योंकि अगर एक स्टेबिलिटी या एक कुछ सालों तक एक हुकूमत हो, इलेक्टेड हुकूमत हो, उससे फ़ायदा हो जाता है, तो वो भी नहीं हुआ है। तो मेरे ख्याल बुनियादी तौर पे जो हुआ है, क्योंकि दुनिया में हमारे ख़ित्ते में, इस इलाके में और ममालिक हमसे ज़्यादा तेज़ी से तरक्की कर रहे हैं। इंडिया बहुत आगे निकल गया, बांग्लादेश भी आगे, श्रीलंका में जो प्रॉब्लम हुआ था उसके बावजूद कुछ बेहतरी आई है। ये सारी चीज़ें हैं, लेकिन हम जो है अपने पुराने मसलों को सही तरह से समझ नहीं पाए और देख नहीं पाए, और मेरे ख्याल है अब बहुत संगीन सीरियस वक्त आ गया कि हम सोचें कि हमने आगे किस तरह बढ़ना है, क्या करना है, और फ़र्क तरह से सोचें।
تو اس کے لیے آپ کی کیا سجیسشن ہے یا جو ہمارے ملک کا انٹیلیجنسیا ہے وہ کیا کہتا ہے؟
میرے خیال میں سب سے اہم چیز تو ہے کہ جو 4-5 چیزیں سامنے آتی ہیں. ایک تو یہ کہ عورتوں کو زیادہ مواقع ملنے چاہیے, ٹھیک ہے, تعلیم میں, کام میں, سیکیورٹی پروٹیکشن میں, اور جو ہمارے ہاں دقیانوسی قسم کے بیکورڈ دقیانوسی پرانے قسم کے خیالات ہیں, جو لوگ ہیں جو عورتوں کو آگے نہیں آنے دیتے, اب حکومت کو اور اداروں کو کوشش کرنی چاہیے کہ عورتیں آگے آئیں, پڑھیں, کام کریں. جو ہو رہا ہے تھوڑا بہت ہو رہا ہے, اس میں کوئی شک نہیں, لیکن میں کچھ ابھی فگرز دکھاؤں گا اپنی پریزنٹیشن میں. اس میں جو 154 ممالک ہیں 154, اس میں جو جینڈر پیرٹی ہے, جو عورتوں کے حقوق کہہ لیں یا ان کی اقتصادی اکنامک سچویشن کہہ لیں, وی آر دا 3rd worst country in the world, which is terrible, which is very very. تو women need more rights, more opportunities, بہت ضروری ہے. دوسرا یہ کہ ہمارے پڑوسیوں سے اچھے تعلقات نہیں ہیں. ایک طرف ایران کے ساتھ ہم امریکہ کی وجہ سے جو سینکشنز ہیں ہم کچھ نہیں کر سکتے یا نہیں کر پاتے. انڈیا سے ہمارے تعلقات بہت برے ہیں, وہ بہتر کریں. ہمارے ملک میں فوج ایک بہت بڑا ادارہ ہے, اٹس اے ویری امپورٹنٹ انسٹیٹیوشن. آئی تھنک یہ بھی ضروری ہے کہ سیاستدان, فوج, ٹیکنوکریٹ, سول سوسائٹی مل کر سوچے کہ یہ جس طرح کا نظام چل رہا ہے صحیح نہیں چل رہا, اس کو ٹھیک کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. کم از کم ہم یہ مان لیں کہ چیزیں صحیح نہیں ہیں. ہم تو اکثر کہتے ہیں کہ نہیں ٹھیک ہو جائیں گی, یہ ہو جائے گا, وہ ہو جائے گا. آئی تھنک ایسا نہیں ہے, اور ضروری ہے کہ کچھ جو ہوتا ہے کہ حقیقت کو سمجھنے کی کوشش کریں, یہ بہت ضروری ہے.
تو سر پولیٹیکل انسٹیبلٹی اور جو ملک میں اس قدر مہنگائی, ان امپلائمنٹ, تو ان سب کو ہم عورتوں کو بہتر تعلیم و تربیت دینے کے بعد ہم ان تمام مسائل پہ قابو پا پائیں گے؟
ضروری نہیں ہے کہ کر پائیں گے, لیکن کم از کم ابتدا کریں, شروع کریں, کوشش کریں آگے بڑھنے کی. میرے خیال ہے اس سے ہو سکتا ہے. لیکن ہمارا ایز اکانومسٹ اور جو ہیں لوگ, ان کا کام تو یہ ہے کہ ہم تجاویز دیں, اور حکومت کو بھی میرے خیال ہے اب تھوڑا احساس ہو گیا ہے کہ جو پہلے جیسے چیزیں چل رہی تھیں اب ویسے نہیں چل سکتی. تو مہنگائی بہت زیادہ ہے اور ملکوں میں اتنی نہیں ہے, بے روزگاری ہمارے ملک میں زیادہ ہے اور ملکوں میں نہیں, تو ان کو ایڈریس کرنے کی ضرورت ہے.
تھینک یو سر.
تھینک یو.
پاکستان کو اقتصادی میدان میں دوبارہ آگے لانے کے لیے اپنے پڑوسیوں سے تمام اختلافات کو بالائے طاق رکھنا ہوگا, اور خواتین کو ہر میدان میں بڑھاوا دینا ہوگا. صبح الناس, کیمرہ پرسن یاسمین کے ساتھ, میٹروپولیٹن یونیورسٹی, ٹورانٹو.